Venezuelan security forces capture a U.S. spy in the state of Falcón. 50 feared dead after a mine collapse in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Mali's military rulers propose a 2-year transitional government. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Carla Gonzalez and this is from the South. On Friday, the Venezuelan president announced the capture of a U.S. spy in the state of Falcón, who was allegedly gathering information on state oil facilities.
El día de ayer en el estado Falcón.
In the state of Falcón, a U.S. spy was caught gathering intel on the Amoay and Cardón refineries. We found all the proof, all videos and photos.
Este espía es
The spy was a Marine who used to work in CIA bases in Iraq. He was found with heavy weaponry, specialized weapons. He was carrying large amounts of cash, as well as other supplies that are in the hands of the public ministry.
President Nicolás Maduro said this arrest is part of a plan to dismantle a terrorist attack against an oil refinery.
Esto se suma a que
This capture comes just days after Oil Minister Tarek El Aissami, working along with scientific and engineering experts, discovered a plan to blow up the Palito refinery. I call attention to all refinery workers. We must reinforce all security measures.
And the head of the Strategic Operational Command of the Armed Forces in Venezuela has rejected statements by the U.S. Southern Command Chief, who has accused Venezuela of promoting drug trafficking.
All this coincides with the visit 11 days ago of the chief of the U.S. Southern Command, who continually accuses Venezuela of drug trafficking. Totally false, because we, the Venezuelan military, we, the FANB, we, the Venezuelan state, the authorities, permanently fight against drug trafficking. And that Admiral Craig Fowler, what he does, it is disrespect Venezuelan military honor by creating so many lies. Of course, ordered with the help of his government and of the governments of the far right that are on the borders of Venezuela.
The Peruvian Congress approved a motion on Friday to begin impeachment proceedings against President Martin Vizcarra for moral incapacity. With 65 votes in favor, 36 against, and 24 abstentions, the Congress has officially accepted the motion, stemming from accusations regarding the president's involvement in a corruption scandal. Members of Congress previously heard recordings of 2 private conversations between President Vizcarra and government officials about his meetings with Richard Cisneros, a singer who is being investigated for being fraudulently awarded government contracts.
Mr. President, the result of the votes is as follows: 111 votes in favor, 8 against, 8 abstentions. Congress members, 111 Congress members have voted in favor, 8 against, 8 abstentions. Consequently, the constitutional reform that incorporates Articles 34A and 39A in the political constitution regarding the impediment to run for office or to exercise public office has been approved.
The number of people who have died at the hands of the Colombian police during protests against police brutality has increased to 14. The protests have spread to several cities of the country and were sparked by the death of lawyer Javier Ordóñez, who was beaten and repeatedly tasered by police officers. On Friday, the Health Secretariat reported 3 new deaths. 2 of the victims were identified as a 40-year-old woman and a 17-year-old boy, while the third has not yet been identified. A group of lawyers mobilized in front of the Supreme Court of Justice in the Dominican Republic on Friday to demand the reopening of courts that have been closed since the beginning of the COVID-19 state of emergency. The lawyers called for in-person sessions in order to optimize their work, while noting that virtual hearings must be agreed upon the parties to obtain fair and adequate results. They stressed that other public institutions are open while trials continue behind closed doors. They said that they would continue to protest until their demands were addressed by the Supreme Court.
The reason for this visit is in principle so people realize we are not working. That's why we are here. We all have problems. We don't rent for offices. Many of these people here have had to hand them over. At home, we do not have enough to provide for our children. We have not enrolled them in schools. Why is this the case? The courts are here for just one case. I have made many requests through digital channels, and I have not been given any answers. I go to the courts, and they don't let me in. So how can I solve this problem?
We have more stories coming up. Don't go away. Welcome back. Let's continue with news. In Bolivia, the presidential candidate for the movement towards socialism, Luis Arce, said that as part of last November's coup, foreign economic interests were imposed that are now harming the country. There's more in this report.
Since the opening of the proselytizing activity on September 6th, the movement for socialism, which appears first in the polls of voting intention, carries out daily face-to-face activity. This is a walk in the city of El Alto, where protesters are denouncing the return of racism.
Here we are, in spite of the judicial persecution that we suffer, in spite of the fact that it discriminates us, in spite of the fact that it's insulting.
The movement for socialism candidate denounced that the ambassador of Brazil was at the meeting in which the COP plotters decided that Janine Áñez would be the transitional president. Then, officials from Petrobras and other transnational were placed in the state oil company of Bolivia to favor the Brazilian.
What they do is make gas sales contracts that favor the Brazilians, that favor Petrobras, and that detract from the economy of the Bolivians. They sign a contract where now we pay for the transport of gas from our oil wells to the border. When we were in government, all the cost of transporting the gas from our wells to Brazil was paid for by Petrobras. That cost us $72 million in the whole year.
In mid-July, the Elon Musk businessman from the Tesla company, which builds electric cars with lithium batteries, revealed his participation in the November COP, which rekindled sympathy in the de facto government.
About that Tesla owner, a big company that produces cars with lithium batteries, who said that they are going to hit any government they want, because what they want is the lithium monopoly. Then, coincidentally, we heard the candidate for the vice presidency of Together saying how nice it would be if Tesla came to industrialize our lithium.
A third denunciation has to do with the paralysis of the companies created by the former government in the impulse of the industrialization process, such as the urea and ammonia plants, fertilizers that have a market.
In that plant, we were already exporting goods to Brazil, and since November, the coup leaders have closed the factory, they have closed the company, and we are losing at least $120 million right now.
According to the denunciation of the presidential candidate of the movement to socialism, only in the contract for the export of gas to Brazil and the suspension of the production and sale of urea, the state-owned petrol company of Bolivia loses almost $200 million annually.
Chileans took to the streets on Friday to pay tribute to the victims of the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship, but were met with heavy police repression. Police forcefully dispersed demonstrators who gathered at Santiago General Cemetery on the occasion of the 47th anniversary of the US-backed military coup against Chilean President Salvador Allende. Friday's repression against protesters comes weeks ahead of a referendum on whether to replace the current constitution, which was drafted during the dictatorship.
There is a past. There is also a time to honor those who were persecuted, executed, disappeared, and assassinated during the dictatorship. We understand that we have a historical obligation as before. We lost more than 400 comrades. Here at our headquarters, we have our memorial, where we remember their names, their families, their commitment. That is why we are also committed to the process of structural transformation, which is our duty, where the state must be a guarantor of social rights and not a subsidiary that concentrates profit in an abusive way.
The French Prime Minister addressed the COVID-19 situation in the country, calling on the population to learn to live with the coronavirus.
In two major cities, Marseille and Bordeaux, as well as in Guadeloupe, We are currently seeing a worrying evolution of contaminations, particularly among the elderly, as well as an elderly high rate of hospitalization, taking into account the forecasts that we can make at 3 weeks on the occupation of the intensive care beds. I have asked the Perfect Concern to propose to me by Monday, and after having carried out the necessary local consultations, a set of new complementary measures. Yes, the virus is here for a few more months, and we must learn to live with it without letting ourselves be drawn back into a logic of general lockdown.
COVID-19 figures are rising in the French Overseas Department of Guadeloupe in the Caribbean, where intensive care units are running at maximum capacity.
The situation is very worrying. All the indicators are in the red. At the intra-hospital level, our resuscitation and critical care are full. We have already prepared a unit of 8 extra beds to accommodate other patients for critical care if necessary. So it's very tense, not in terms of equipment and space, but in terms of human resources. It's difficult to redeploy staff. We were able to do it at the cost of a partial deprogramming of surgeries. And apart from critical care, since our 2 sectors that make up the COVID unit are full, we are in the process of activating a 3rd sector of 24 beds. During the first wave, the confinement made almost all road accidents disappear and chronic illness no longer came to the hospital. So naturally, there was room to manage COVID patients, but there were fewer COVID patients in the first wave than there are right now. For example, if I talk to you about resuscitation, the 30 patients that we managed in 1 month, in the first wave, the 30 patients passed in 3 months. You see, the curve is completely different. It is much steeper.
In other news, political figures commemorated the National Day of Catalonia on Friday. Let's listen to what they had to say.
From Catalonia, we must continue to claim that a political response to a political conflict is needed, and that this response cannot continue through repression and the judicialization of politics, and therefore we demand amnesty and the release of political prisoners and exiles, and to be able to exercise the right of self-determination, as is wanted by the people of Catalonia.
We are immersed in the health crisis and other crises derived from this COVID-19 crisis that add to the democratic crisis that this country is living and the political conflict that Catalonia is experiencing with the state. Today, for the 3rd consecutive year, it is the 3rd diada where there are exiled and political prisoners.
It's not a diada where there can be big demonstrations, there can be crowds, but it's a day that we can also turn into an opportunity to be with the people closest to us, to take care of ourselves, to get strength, because we live in a very difficult times and obviously we can sort it out together, but in order to do that, we need to take care of each other.
The CEO of the Japanese transport company that operated the bulk carrier that ran aground off the coast of Mauritius announced a contribution of about $9 million over the coming years to support restoring the marine environment.
First of all, in order for our company to assume its social responsibility, we commit ourselves to give our maximum through aid and support measures for the inhabitants of Mauritius. We still need to investigate how big the damage will be and how long it will take for recovery. In this sense, I cannot tell you exactly how many years we are committed to. However, our company wants to make a serious commitment to the environmental protection of Mauritius and to help the daily life of its inhabitants. We believe that the issue of compensation is completely separate from our support measures aimed at fulfilling our social responsibility.
We're taking one last break. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. Jamaicans are mourning the death of reggae singer Frederick Tootz from the iconic band Tootz and the Maytals. Tootz passed away at the University of Hospital of the West Indies in St. Andrew on Friday evening. It is unclear how he died, but the 77-year-old was tested for COVID-19 in the last 2 weeks and was placed in intensive care. Tootz is a 3-time winner of the Jamaica Festival Song Competition and was one of the 10 finalists for 2020. He is credited for popularizing reggae, even naming this rhythm with the 1968 single Do the Reggae. Prime Minister Andrew Holness has offered condolences to his family, saying the singer contributed significantly to brand Jamaica. In other news, about 50 people are feared dead after a gold mine collapsed in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo following torrential rain. The accident in a makeshift mine occurred on Friday in the town of Kamituga in South Kivu province. According to witnesses, the mine curved in after a nearby river flooded. The town's mayor has decreed a 2-day mourning period and called on local residents to help extract the bodies from the ground. Civilian and military representatives in Mali met for a second round of talks on Friday in order to discuss a proposal to appoint a 2-year transitional government.
The military cannot make propositions. It is up to the sovereign people of Mali to make suggestions. My personal view and the suggestion from our Gao region during these talks is to have a civil leader governing the transition.
Our group's attitude is civil. I would say that I would still be in favor of putting a vice presidential position in place and giving the vice presidency to the military. I think this is something that can be negotiated with ECOWAS for the simple reason that the divisions are very wide.
The main goal is to have a military leader in power. It's open for all to see that a third of Mali is occupied. If you look at the state of Mali, who can dare say to give power to a civilian? It will never work. It will never work. The country is at war. We want a military man, period.
Angolan authorities confirmed 60 new COVID-19 cases located in the capital, Luanda, which has reported 92% of the total cases in the country. Over 1,800 cases remain active, of which 3 are in critical condition, while more than 1,700 are asymptomatic. In total, the country has confirmed over 3,200, while the death toll stands at 131. Moroccan authorities announced the arrest of members of a suspected Islamic State group affiliated cell on Friday.
It is an operation that has been followed for some time. When we realized that it was a dangerous cell primed to go into action at any moment, we acted in a simultaneous operation because its members were deployed in several cities: Tifler, Tamara, Shirkat, and Tangier. We discovered some very important and dangerous things. This is the peculiarity of this cell. We have not had any material used by the suicide bombers since the attacks of 2003. Even if the Islamic State was defeated in the Levant, in the region of Syria and Iraq, it is an ideology that is convenient and doesn't need a territory. It can develop where it finds sympathizers easily.
A runoff election for the remaining parliamentary seats was held in 9 Iranian provinces on Friday after a 5-month delay due to the pandemic. The Interior Minister said the elections were held in full compliance with health protocols in order to guarantee the safety of both voters and electoral officials. The first round of elections was held in February and the second was due to be held on April 17th, but was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Parliamentary elections in the capital, Tehran, and 2 other cities will be held next year, alongside presidential and city council elections. September 11th marked the 19th anniversary of the fall of the World Trade Center towers in the U.S. city of New York. The event marked the beginning of a structural change in U.S. foreign and military policies, leading to numerous invasions around the world. Let's take a closer look.
In the official version of the U.S. government, the event was described as a terrorist attack attributed to the extremist Afghan group Al-Qaeda. Based on this, on October 7, 2001, more than 28,000 U.S. military occupied the territory of Afghanistan. The invasion was supported by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and justified as a war against terrorism by the U.S. government and its allies. Years after the attacks, several evidence discovered later questioned the U.S. government's version of the events. A large number of specialists gathered in the organization 9/11 Truth Movement, and they explained that the impacts of the planes against the World Trade Center towers and the subsequent fires could not have caused the total collapse of the infrastructure, and even less at the speed of its collapse. These and other irregularities have been researched by analysts and experts that agree that the different U.S. governments have not been able to give reliable answers to the questions regarding the attacks of 9/11. The events were used to justify invasions, bombings, and occupations of several nations, including Afghanistan and Iraq. Moreover, it configured a new strategy for U.S. military expansion under the so-called fight against terrorism.
And also on September 11th, Chileans commemorate the anniversary of the 1973 coup against a socialist president. So we finish this news brief with images of this popular revolutionary leader, Salvador Allende, his legacy, and the events of that day nearly 50 years ago. Until next time.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. 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 De pie cantar que vamos a triunfar. Avanzan ya banderas de unidad y tú vendrás marchando junto a mí y así verás tu canto y tu bandera florecer, la luz de un rojo amanecer anuncia ya la vida que vendrá. De pie marchar el pueblo va a triunfar, será mejor la vida que vendrá a conquistar nuestra felicidad y en un clamor mil voces de combate se alzarán, dirán.